Okay, Maria, back with another video. This doesn't necessarily relate to gang stalking or anything. I'm kind of taking a break right now and trying to focus on other things, and I've been thinking a lot about, just how people misjudge other people and sometimes put pressure on them to behave or live a certain way that's contrary to their well-being. And so I was thinking today a lot about, this wasn't deliberate, but I was kind of watching these different videos on serial killers, and then like Andrea Yates popped up yesterday. So I put it off and didn't actually watch the videos till today. But these two women, I'm referring to Andrea Yates as well as Susan Smith, have been in the back of my mind since both of their stories had come out. Now, these are very old stories, mind you, because Susan Smith's issue was back in 1994, and Andrea Yates was back in 2001. But I remember when both of these stories came out, I kept thinking, oh, by the way, this is my Kindle. This is the little wolf. He's waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. This is the other side of my Kindle. I thought that would be cute, So anyway, I'm not in this video. Anyway, back to both of these women. Andrea Yates' issue came out in 2001. And at both times, I was really impressed with these stories because I felt as though people really were kind of missing the message. At least I looked at it in a completely different way, and you can share your thoughts with me. I believe that Andrea Yates and Susan Smith, and it's a very sad situation, but I believe they were products of their society and their environment. And sadly, I think the unrealistic role placed on women in society results in tragedy in one form or another. And, some people, a lot of women are targeted individuals. Those children are targeted individuals. They were targeted since they were children. In this case, I was. I believe my brothers and sisters kind of bullied me and always made sure that my living environments were just an absolute nightmare. But, and some people shy away from the possibility of not having children, and because they feel that the pressure of society to have children. Now, don't get me wrong, we have to continue producing offspring on this earth, because if we don't, we as a human species would die. I mean, we have to continue that. But we don't think about the responsibilities behind it. Now, Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children, and prior to getting married, she did have a career in nursing, and she had, experienced a different life before getting married. And maybe, who's to say, I don't know if it was society pressuring her to get married and have children, and there's nothing wrong with having children or getting married. That's not my point. But she had 5 children, and she was a part of a belief system that I believe it's called the Quiverful movement, where they believe in having as many babies as God allows. And there's nothing wrong with this, okay? But a lot of people, focus on the fact that babies are cute to cuddle, and they certainly are. They're very cute. But they are a lifelong responsibility that not everybody is up to that task to fulfill that role. And this is not, like I said, bashing that sort of belief system, because like I said, it's important to produce offspring in order to continue on. We have to have more people on the earth, adequate people on the earth, but not everybody is meant to be that way. And I'm not saying that Andrea Yates was divided between her career and her marriage, because I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if she seemed like she was just on a very basic level as far as work was concerned. I don't think she was like making millions. She was like a nurse or something. But I think what Andrea Yates maybe would have been fine with maybe just one kid, but she was under this impression or this belief system to continue to have more children, as many as it could. So I'm assuming that birth control was not used, okay? And so, oftentimes when you're around people, they put a lot of pressure. Like when you get married, people are like, are you going to have kids right now? And, the pressure of kids and kids and kids and kids and more kids. And if Andrea Yates had the opportunity to maybe just have one kid, or maybe not have kids at all. Maybe just her and her husband wanted to be together, or maybe she shouldn't have gotten married, period. Maybe things would have been different for her. And that's my point. It's just the fact that sometimes people make decisions based on what is expected of them, and not something that they were able to even consider any other possibility of. Like, she was around, I guess she's from Texas, okay? So I guess her world pretty much revolved around, her neighbors or friends or family, much like Susan Smith. I mean, Susan Smith also drowned her children. She was lived in Union, South Carolina, and this place is known to revolve around family and religion. And like I said, nothing wrong with religion, okay? But sometimes, people take things to the extreme where they're either misinformed about what the Bible says, and they believe maybe a preacher, like, Andrea Yates in her case, she was very into the preacher that was giving her this information, that was giving her these ideas, and maybe even adding to the pressure of, keep cranking out these children, and she should continually have a smile on her face. And even though she was, wearing herself down and, trying to fulfill a role that was impossible for her to do, she was basically being forced or coerced into pretending that she was happy and everything was okay, and it wasn't okay. So I guess my point is about these two women is that they both seem like they were highly influenced by what was going on around them. Their gender roles played a role in it. The very fact that Susan Smith lied and blamed it on a black man is another proof of her social conditioning. For her to even just have that pop in her mind, I can just blame it on him, that's another form of her social conditioning. This is what people have been led to believe. And a lot of common beliefs are actually wrong, and they end up, the end result is just absolutely horrific. And in my case, in the targeted individual case, I am one. I just had to throw this in there, I guess. It's part of my life, okay? Not everybody is enthusiastic about having kids. They're just not, okay? And, and I'm not saying, go get abortions or things. I think people should be wise enough to make decisions before they even have to get in that situation to where, but, my point is that in one form or another, if people don't know who they are, know their limitations, and have the knowledge to make informed decisions, this weird cycle is going to continue to happen. So let's just assume Andrea Yates and Susan Smith didn't kill their kids, okay? Let's just assume that their kids would have continued on into society, and eventually I'm sure their children would have found out that maybe their moms weren't as loving to them, because you can only play this charade for so long, okay? So what happens to people who are raised in families where they're really not given the emotional love, attention, and nurturing that they're supposed to get? I mean, I'm talking about they're not from families that are really as warm and giving and loving as what we are supposed to be, ideally, like in a fairy tale. I think a lot of targeted individuals are the result of that. So my point, I guess when I see stories like Susan Smith and Andrea Yates, my feeling about them is like, it's a shame. Yes, it is. Do you get mad at them? Yes, you do. But when I really get down to it, I just think, well, you know what? This is their product of their environment. And the sad part is, we live in a society that doesn't really encourage alternative thinking. And because I think a lot of people are under the assumption that because you can think differently means that you are in some way a hellraiser or you're standing up against an establishment. That's not necessarily true, okay? Some people make informed decisions because it's a very wise decision. And there are a lot of teenage kids, in big cities like, in Los Angeles that are living on the streets. A lot of kids in San Francisco living on the streets. There's kids in big cities that are living on the streets because their parents they lost steam for their so-called American dream. Their intentions were good. They thought about having that cute baby, but the baby hits a certain age where they go through the awkward age and they start developing opinions and evolving into who they are. And some parents just aren't up to the task, and that's the result of it. Either a targeted individual, somebody living out in the street, or whatever. And that's my point, So I'm looking at people like Andrea Yates as kind of a case study, and Susan Smith as well. And so I didn't know that Susan Smith was saying things like, she wondered what it was like to not have kids. And maybe up to that point when she said that, that never even crossed her mind because nobody ever gave her the option, the alternative, the possibility that maybe that wasn't something that was for her in the first place. Now, like I said, I would never, it's never been in my heart to do something like that. But these women who do these things, they need to be looked at. I mean, they need to be, I look at them and I think, gosh, you know, it's a sad situation, but I mean, this is what I'm getting from it, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, you know, and it's a break from dwelling on my issues in a way. I mean, I can see my own issues in it only because I'm a targeted individual, and, you know, I guess you get scapegoated from your family or whatever, and you see, you know, that maybe having children is not what everybody should be doing. You know, it's not for everybody. And so I guess that's my point. But also, you know, another thing that caught my attention about this is like they were saying about Susan Smith, you know, that in high school she was voted like the friendliest girl, and people tend to be fooled or misled or blind to how people really behave and who they really are. Just because, you know, she could have been, you know, the friendliest girl or more, even one of those people who are given the title as most likely to succeed, doesn't mean that they don't have those tendencies. You know what I mean? People can only take so much, you know. These stories are very tragic, but it's another, to me, confirmation and something to consider in the back of my mind about social conditioning and how people need to think about what they do before they do it. And also, my point's not to judge, but it's to allow people to consider both options, you know, and to stop forcing people or coercing them or leading them into a direction that may not be for them. Because the end result, whether they decide to, you know, get an abortion, or that if they don't end up getting an abortion, then they end up raising kids that they really don't want and they end up abusing. You know, either way, it's a tragedy. So people need to be responsible. That's the key. The key is to be responsible, to know what it is that you're getting involved in and what you're doing. And then also, you know, thinking, you know, hey, giving women the option. We should always, you know, raise children or women, you know, to believe, or anybody. You should always, you know, promote a healthy society, you know, to where you do understand that giving life is a very important responsibility. It is a very big responsibility. But also, it's a responsibility that not everybody is supposed to have. And just because you're not supposed to be that person having a kid doesn't mean that you're useless. I mean, there's other things that you can do to contribute to society. You know, it's responsible to not bring children in the world if you're not fully prepared to be a parent, you know. And these women are examples of that. So it's better, you know, to know yourself, you know, and, you know, than to bring other people into a world, you know, that they're not really meant to be in is another thing that kind of crossed my mind about these women in this situation and just life in general, and how, you know, people tend to do things just because there's pressure around them to do it. You know, people buy cars because, you know, somebody else has that same model, or they dress and behave in a way just because somebody else does. And it's, you know, I believe that there is benefit in herd mentality to a certain extent. Like, you know, if there was a disaster or something, people need to be organized. People need to have other people follow instructions to organize, to get things straight and to move. I mean, that exists in nature for a reason. But when, you know, people aren't allowed to make up their own minds, and they feel like they're constantly being, you know, questioned and picked apart because they've made a decision that other people can't understand. Well, you know, just because, you know, like I was reading, like I said, I mentioned this in one of my other videos, that a lot of single women who are my age get targeted. And I suppose it's because some people feel as though she's supposed to be married with children or whatever. Well, you know, it's not really anybody's right to pick and tear apart somebody's decision, you know, or even question it, you know, and it's you don't know that person, and you could end up convincing a person to do something that is not good for anybody. It's not good for the well-being of that person, herself, or her future children, you know. So that's my issue. It's just, you know, I guess mind your own business in a world, in some ways. It's kind of like, that would save a lot of people a lot of grief if people just stayed out of other people's business. Another issue that kind of flashed my mind. But anyway, I think that, this is a very simplistic view of Andrea Yates and Susan Smith. But, I mean, obviously these women were, they were raised to not really think for themselves, to seek out knowledge, to think outside the box, and they weren't in an environment that encouraged that. And just because somebody thinks alternatively doesn't mean that they are trying to destroy tradition. Some people want to improve tradition. And I think, when people make a conscious decision to not have kids, sometimes that's for the better of society. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up, and take care and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.